So you've got a fish tank that's getting eaten up with algae. Your plants are starting to melt back. You don't know what's going on. You're about ready to give up. Don't. I've got the perfect thing to solve all your problems, and that is the F-Zone CO2 generator. Now, why would you want to add CO2 as a beginner to a regular old fish tank? Well, there's many benefits. Number one, and most importantly, it is going to make your plants grow very quickly and outcompete the algae that's taken over your aquarium and that is eating your plants slowly. So CO2 is essential for plant growth. They need sunlight, they need nutrients, and they need carbon dioxide. In a normal aquarium environment, that carbon dioxide is quickly depleted. So we need to incorporate some back into our water column to feed those plants the carbon that they need to survive. One of the easiest and cheapest methods to doing that these days is with one of these at-home, do-it-yourself CO2 generators. And this is not the do-it-yourself yeast mess with sugar stuff. That's gross, and you don't really want to mess with that. It's inconsistent. It will lead to blackbeard algae down the road if you're not super diligent. And it's just a big mess. But the old school CO2 method of getting a huge container and taking it out to a welding shop or an industrial place and getting it filled up with actual CO2 gas, that's kind of a lot of trouble. So these CO2 generator kits that are out on the market right now are a wonderful, cheap, easy solution to solving a problem that's been around for a long time in the aquarium hobby. All we have to do is add two elements together, baking soda and citric acid. These are common cleaning products that you can get at any store, grocery store, Walmart, online, Amazon, anything like that. You can buy them in bulk and get them for very cheap. You mix those together with a little bit of water, and that reaction that they create causes carbon dioxide, which is then incorporated into our water systems. So very easy, very foolproof, very safe. You may have some hesitancy about the pressures involved, and there are some serious pressures involved in these little systems, but they all have safety measures which will mitigate any kind of danger that you may sense could be incorporated here. So the safety valve, if you add way too much products into there and it's you just do a lot of things wrong, it will actually course correct and release any excess pressure on its own, and it will not explode. There will be no tragedy or anything. So for you beginners, this is super easy to do, super beneficial. You're going to get so much more plant growth that $100 investment now will pay for itself down the road. If you have other aquariums, you will be able to take cuttings off of your plants in these CO2 powered tanks and move to other tanks, so you'll never have to buy plants again. As you see with all my aquariums here, I haven't bought an aquarium plant in many years. I just take cuttings and repurpose the 25 or 30 or so plants that I have growing in here over and over again. So the F-Zone system is a little different than some of the other products on the market. They've got a couple of elements of this system that are above and beyond what you're going to find with your Hygers and your Classias and some of those other brands that are available online. Number one, and most importantly, in their bottle, on the lip and the mouth of the bottle, the threads are on the outside and they're very easy to actually operate. So when you're screwing the regulator on, in the video you'll see in a minute, I make a mess because I use my funnel instead of theirs. I should have just used what came in the box, but I got a little water splashing out. But once you get that water in there, you want to get that regulator screwed on pretty quickly. And this F-Zone system is much easier and much more foolproof than the fine thread systems you see on some of these other brands. So I really do like that. The machining on the F-Zone is really nice. They've got some different connection systems than some of the other folks do, and overall it's a really nice product. The machining is done well. The parts are all high quality. They all fit together very well. It's easy to assemble, and it's easy to get up and running in your tank. The CO2 diffuser that's included with the F-Zone system is also very nice, and the packaging is really, really good. I have to say, this is the safest and most professional packaging of any of these CO2 systems that I have used, of any of the brands that I've had experience with. The F-Zone is a higher quality packaging for sure. It's laid out really well. You get some stickers that go on the tank, and they will tell you what to do, what not to do, how much of each of these products to add, so that you won't forget that or have to go back and look at the manual later on. So I'm going to be setting this CO2 generator up today on a tank that I set up just a few weeks ago, which was in my under gravel filter series. And this is the second of 2 tanks that I set up with under gravel filters. And this one was just the under gravel filter. No additional filtration or flow was incorporated. And it has just gotten off to a little too slow of a start for me to be comfortable with. So I'm going to incorporate this element of CO2 in there, and I'm going to put a little extra flow into the tank with a internal filter as well, a very small, very low wattage internal filter, just to circulate that CO2 a little bit. So that's what we're doing here today. That's why we're incorporating CO2 in this case. I could just let it go, and it would probably turn out just fine. Actually, I'm sure it would. But I want it to go a little faster, so it's just more lush, just looks better, and is just easier for me to maintain. So there's only a few pieces we really have to assemble when we get this F-Zone CO2 generator kit. We've got the basic regulator. We've got the filter piece, which is going to go kind of inside on the bottom. And when you're assembling these things, make sure you don't cross thread anything. These are all kind of finely threaded pieces. Make sure you get them threaded in there right. These white pieces are the filters for this. Some of these filter sections use different substances to filter, but this one is singular. Then we've got our bubble counter, which is going to go on top here, and we're going to thread this guy in right there. And this is all machined very well. It all fits really nicely. I'll get that in there, get that tightened down. Then I've got my cap for my bubble counter. But before I put my cap on, I'm going to fill this bubble counter with some mineral oil. Now, some people will use water, but I have found that mineral oil will last much, much longer. And so that's what I'm going to use. I don't want to overfill it. And there we go. I'll get my top on here. And that's all the assembly that's really required. All right, so here we are. We've got everything assembled and we're ready to mix our ingredients. I've got 200 grams of baking soda mixed with 200 grams of citric acid. These are common household products that you can get in family-size containers off of Amazon or from Costco or Walmart or any of those places, and they're very inexpensive. This is only, I don't know, maybe $1's worth of these materials. Then I've got 300 grams or milliliters, rather, of water, which is ultimately the same thing. Now I'm going to pour the 2 chemicals in first into our tank. I'm going to try not to spill them too much. All right, so there we go. We've got our baking soda. We've got our citric acid in there. I didn't spill too much of it, just a very tiny amount. Then we're going to tilt this at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to pour in my water, and I'm going to quickly have to get my cap, my regulator, on top of here. So here we go, tilting, pouring in our water. Try not to disturb it too much. A little bit of kickback. And then we screw our cap on, and we are making CO2. Tighten her up. Now that got a little water out there because the CO2 was coming out. That's all there is to it. You can already see the cold reaction happening between those three elements, the water, the baking soda, and the citric acid. Now I'm gonna let this sit here for a minute and build the pressure while I get things set up for our tank that this is gonna go on. So our F-Zone CO2 generator comes with a pretty nice little CO2 diffuser. This is cool looking. It's got its own little suction cup that fits with it. And it has this little U fitting that will go over your rimless tank and make it all look nice and seamless, but I'm not going to be able to use that. When you're using your CO2, no matter where you're getting your CO2 from, you have to use a special hose that is particularly formulated to accommodate CO2. If you use a regular air hose, it will leak that CO2 out. It will not work. So make sure you have CO2 hose to use with this guy. So let's get this set up in our tank. Now here is this comparable tank that I did, finished maybe 2 to 3 days before the tank we're adding CO2 to. And you see that it is lush with growth, probably has less light intensity. I haven't actually measured it. It's really hard to measure a true aquarium light when it's spread out like that. But this guy, no algae, very lush growth. And we see a nice little easy trickle of CO2. You do not have to saturate the water with CO2 to get the growth from the plants that you really want. When we compare that growth to this tank, we notice that even though these were set up at basically the same time, the plant growth in this tank, even though now it's got its CO2 pumping back there, beforehand was just not as lush, just not as fast, and so it was allowing some of that algae to crop up in there. So to sum all this up, as a beginner, I can't encourage you enough to incorporate CO2 into your tank or tanks. It's going to make your whole experience better. It's going to make your whole experience with growing plants and creating a small self-contained ecosystem much easier and much simpler, and just your whole experience will be better with CO2. Initially, it seems like a complication that you could avoid. And you can grow many plants without CO2. But the bottom line is none of your plants are going to grow as good as they will with that little bit of CO2 being incorporated. Now, there's a lot to the CO2 systems. There's a lot to the CO2 methods. I'm just going to breeze through a couple things right quick. I encourage you to investigate further. I don't use any CO2 level testing equipment, drop checkers, the little glass, blown glass. I don't know what shape that is, but it holds a little chemical inside your aquarium, and it will tell you the actual concentration of CO2 in your water. I don't use those at all because I do not push the levels of CO2 in my tanks. I get so much plant growth from using about 1 to 1.5 bubbles per second of CO2 in my 20 and 40 gallon tanks that I don't care to saturate the water fully with CO2. Without a doubt, I am not making any argument against. I know for a fact if I push that level up more, I could get even more plant growth. But for me, I have enough to deal with as it is. I'm getting great plant growth on all of the tanks that I'm incorporating CO2 with. So I don't really want any more plant growth. So that 1 to 1.5 bubbles per second of CO2, which you adjust with your little your bubble thing there. It's very easy to do on the F-Zone. There's a special system here actually with your regulator. You've got to open the main valve on the left, and then you can adjust your bubble cylinder there with the adjustment on the right. But you want to get that where you see that 1 to 2 bubbles per second coming up through there. And that's going to give you about the right saturation, or that's going to give me the right saturation. What you want, I don't know. If you want to run a drop checker and be very technical and very diligent about checking everything, go for it. What you don't want to do is oversaturate the water with CO2, especially if you have a lot of fish, because it could actually harm your fish very badly. So be careful not to use too much CO2, but any CO2, in my experience, is better than none. So I always err on the side of safety, which is just putting a small amount in there. And if it starts to run low and it starts to incorporate less than 1 or 1.5 bubbles per second, then who cares? Like, my plants may slow down a little bit, but they're not going to suffer greatly if the CO2 goes down. So lots of really big advantages to incorporating a carbon dioxide system on your tank. There's virtually no drawbacks. It literally takes about 5 minutes to refill one of these. All you got to do is take it up to your sink, dump out the water that's in there, rinse it out, refill it with the minerals, the materials that you saw me do just a minute ago. Put the water in, screw it back on, and you're right back in business. It couldn't be simpler. It couldn't be easier. Everything is mail order. You don't have to go to any shops to purchase weird industrial products. CO2 is great. It's going to do you right. So I highly encourage it. If you haven't tried it out, don't be intimidated. I didn't know what to think about it when I got into planted tanks. It really was something that it took me a minute to wrap my head around. I had heard about it in different fields of gardening, but yeah, I thought it was just, incorporating a regular old air pump into your tank, and that would give you CO2. But that's not going to do it. You have to have this CO2 system to give you that concentration that you want. You tag that up with a good light, a good lighting system, whatever that may be, and then a little bit of the right nutrients, and you're going to be having a lot of success. Now, if you want to have the ultimate success with your aquariums, check out some of my under gravel filter videos, because that's what's going to really give you a nearly foolproof tank. If you like my video, please subscribe. Please like my video. If you've got anything to say about CO2 systems yourself, please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know about your experiences. I've had a lot of positive experiences with these CO2 systems, and I really think it's very beneficial to my overall experience in the hobby and each individual ecosystem. I think they all really are taking advantage of and benefiting from these additional CO2 systems. I only have these CO2 generators here in my fish room. I don't have any old school actual canisters where you have to take them and refill them. I have messed around with the yeast systems in the past. I don't like it. It's gross. It's a mess, and they're very inconsistent. So these CO2 generators, I think, are the best thing on the market. You can't go wrong. So that's all I've got to say today about CO2 systems, and in particular, this F-Zone CO2 generator. I think it's a great product. I appreciate F-Zone for sponsoring this video, for providing me with this CO2 generator free of cost. I do admit to that, but I'm giving you my honest opinion of their product. I've got experience with a lot of these other brands out there, and I do believe that the F-Zone is the best product on the market for the money right now. You just can't beat it. So check it out, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.